We are going to have Niko Blanks tell us all about his adventure in Hawaii, I believe, living as a analog astronaut. So I'm just going to let Niko take it away.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me share my presentation real quick. All right, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, cool. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I'm excited to share with you my time at High Seas. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and get started. Um, this is me living on the simulated moon, and I got the opportunity to go this past December to Hawaii to live for 2 weeks on an analog moon mission with a crew of 5 other people. Um, and so here we go. So a quick quote that I want you to keep in mind throughout this presentation, just because it kind of captures the whole essence of what the mission was about. It's a Carl Sagan quote, and he said, "Imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere." So just keep that in mind, and then I'll touch back on it at the end of the presentation. So a little bit about me. I was born in Chattanooga, and I was raised on Signal Mountain my whole life. And then I went to Baylor for middle and high school, and then I came to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach to study spaceflight operations with minors in systems engineering and human factors. And I have also to intern at Northrop Grumman last year for 8 months on the sounding rocket operations contract as a mechanical engineer. So that's a little bit about my experiences and what I am currently up to. And so, what is High Seas? It was started in 2013 by a joint venture between NASA and the University of Hawaii. And their goal was to do research on uh, how astronauts um, interact with each other on crews during long duration spaceflight. So they picked Hawaii because it has a very Mars-like environment, and of course, the obvious choice is we eventually want to go live on Mars for a long duration. So they chose a site on the side of Mauna Loa, which is the largest volcano in the world, at 8,200 feet above sea level, and they put a dome that is completely off the grid. Uh, and they had 6 long duration missions there. The longest was a year. So a crew of 6 people lived in this dome for a year um, on a mission, and the other 5 ranged anywhere from 4 months to 8 months as well. So here is, if this will play, I don't know if it'll play. It's a GIF I tried to make, but it doesn't seem to be playing of the area. But you can see an overhead of the dome and what the area around it is like on the side of the mountain. Um, oh, it might be, oh, there it goes. So yeah, you can see this is what the area looks like. I took this with my drone when I took it, and it kind of sets the area, and so you can imagine where we're walking around these giant lava fields where there's nothing in in miles around you. You're completely isolated, and it truly is like you're on another world, whether that be Moon or Mars. Well, I remember Matt actually.
So it looks like Niko might have gotten kicked off, maybe, or his internet connection has had some issues. Let's give it a couple more moments and maybe he'll be able to catch up or rejoin. If not, we'll figure it out. Yeah, it looks like he got kicked out. Let's let him rejoin and see what happens. Hey, Niko.
Hello, am I back?
Yeah, you are.
Sorry, I don't know how long I was gone, but
Well, you were last discussing how it's like another world.
okay.
That it's truly like another world.
It cut out right as you were about to talk about the habitat.
Okay, perfect. Then I will start there again. So let me share my screen again. All right, so can I full screen this?
So it was before this one. It was before this slide. It was right there if you can see my mouse. Slide 6. Yep.
Okay, so I think slide 6 might have caused some problems, so I'm not gonna do that one. It might it's like a GIF, but so it might be causing problems. So I'll just skip that one. But how I got involved in high seas, uh, I had never expected to do it so soon when how young I am. And I remember, Matt, you told me about the Habitat a couple of years back, and I immediately went and listened to it. And the Habitat is a podcast on Apple that follows the one of the long duration missions at High Seas, High Seas 4, that was a year long, and it goes through their struggles and um, all the challenges and amazing things that they went through on this year long mission. And listening to it, I was hooked, and I was like, "Oh man, I have to do this at some point." But never I would have expected I would be doing it right now. And through some connections I made at school, somebody emailed me and said, "Niko, there's a spot open. You should apply." And so I did, and I got it. And literally 2 weeks after I applied, I was getting on a plane to go to Hawaii. So that was an incredible experience. And this was my crew. So there were 6 of us because the Habitat holds 6 people. We were the Sensoria M3 mission, so we were the third Sensoria mission, and it was um, my crew. The person in the middle bottom is Michaela. She's the commander. Right to her left is Gianna. She was the communications officer. And then to Michaela's right is Leah. She was the Habitat operations officer. Um, in the top right is Emily. She was the science officer. Um, James in the top middle was the vice commander, and then me, and I was the crew engineer. So our objectives on the M3 mission was all personal research. So after they finished those 6 long duration missions that they did, they opened, NASA actually sold the Habitat to a private company called Blue Blue Planet Research, I believe, and the International Moon Base Alliance, and they run the Habitat and do these short duration missions like one I went on to do research. And so I actually went with a lab that I'm a technician at school, the suit lab, to do human factors research. But the crew was doing lava tube biology research, uh, how to create fertilizer from hair, human hair, which I found was very interesting, and even how to grow lettuce on these long duration spaceflight missions. But overall, the objective was just to this was all our first time going on mission, except Michaela. And as commander, she showed us what it's like to be an analog astronaut living on the moon for 2 weeks. And that was really the point of the mission, was to introduce us to this world. So a little bit about my research project that I did with the Suit Lab. Leah and I, Leah is also from the Suit Lab, and so she and I went and we conducted this project called RxEVA. And the goal of RxEVA is to collect biometric data from our EVAs. And EVA is extravehicular activity. So when you're outside the habitat, walking around, going and exploring the area around you, we collected biometric data, and our goal is to characterize it and then optimize that data to improve how we can plan EVA operations for long duration spaceflight, so you don't wear out your crew. Our goal is to collect data so we can write a paper and hopefully submit that for publishing later. So this is the habitat. This is a picture of the crew, of our crew inside, and you can kind of get a feeling of how big it is. It's not very big at all. It has about 1,200 square feet of usable space, and with 2 floors. The bottom floor here, this is the main dome. So you can see us all working at our desks. They're all facing a wall. And behind us, there's the kitchen area and dining room area to the right, and a treadmill, as well as to the back left, there's a science lab and a bathroom. And then up the stairs, there's 6 bedrooms and a bathroom, and that is all. So it's a very small space, and it has a grand total of 2 windows that are both the size of a dinner plate. So we have people fighting over the window all the time, trying to look out and get a view of the outside when you're staring at these white walls all day. So here is a blueprint of the habitat, just so you can get a little better idea. Again, the windows, one was located in the dining area and one was located in the actual science lab. So when you're working at your desk, you're not seeing out into the vista, you're looking at a wall. And so it's very interesting to see how that affects the crew throughout the mission. So this was on the left was my desk, and on the right was my bedroom. And the bedrooms are very tiny. There's literally enough space for a bed and a little tiny desk that is useless basically because of how small it is. And the bedrooms are situated right on the edge of the dome, so you don't have any room above your head because the dome is slanted above your head. So I hit my head several times in the middle of the night when I woke up, but that took some getting used to. And then here's a closer up picture of the kitchen on the left. We had all the incredible amenities you could ever ask for, including 2 burners, a coffee maker, and a water pot, and that is it. So it was great. Oh, and an oven, like a toaster oven. So that was nice. And to the right is the engineering lab, and this is where all the dirty lab, as we called it, and this is where you're coming in from after EVA. All the EVA equipment is stored, and this part is sectioned off from the rest of the dome because there's a lot of dirt in there from outside, and we don't want to get that in the rest of the hab. So, and yeah. And here is the one window that we would regularly look out of that was in the dining room, and you can see how small it was. And that was our view from outside, looking across the valley on Hawaii to Mauna Kea. which is the other volcano across the way. Again, we were located on Mauna Loa at 8,200 feet ish. So yeah, it's hard to tell because Mauna Loa is very, I believe it's a shield wall. Uh,
I think we're having some connection issues, folks. We're working to get those solved.
and starving and ready to eat lunch. So
We lost you,
during the rest of the
Niko.
evening after our EVA would be research time for a couple hours, and that was time to look at your data, do any kind of other work you need to get done, maybe even take a nap if you needed it. I took several naps on the mission, and at 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. the Capcom window would open, and that is when we're sending in our reports for the day, including science reports. I, as the engineer, had an engineering report I had to send in every day that consisted of power levels in the habitat, water levels, CO2 levels. So the habitat, it had a limited amount of water we could use for the mission, 100 gallons for 2 weeks. And so we were constantly watching that, monitoring that, trying to limit how much water we were using. For power, we were completely off of solar panels. So when the weather would not get great, you could be without power. And then CO2 levels, the ventilation's not very great. So we had to watch CO2, and if it got too high, there was a fan we turn on to vent that out. And then at around 9, sometimes we do a second EVA, and those were the fun ones because those were the night EVAs. And let me tell you, the sky was absolutely amazing. There was not a cloud in the sky at night. Usually, it was so clear, and I've never seen so many stars in my entire life. Like it was so beautiful. And then we go to bed by midnight after usually watching a movie and drinking some hot cocoa, and then wake up the next day and do it again. So I kind of broke it down a lot more simply. Our day was broken down in 15-minute increments that we had to follow. So it was just like they do on the ISS and in space. You're very regimented and you have to plan everything out the day before, or even the week before. So yeah, and on the right you can see that's us at dinner. It gets very cold at night in the habitat, so we would all bundle up in blankets because I believe this was on a night where we were on low power, so we had all the lights off, the heating was off. Only one light on, eating very minimal. So, yeah. Speaking of eating, what did the food look like? Not amazing, I'll tell you that. We for breakfast we ate a lot of pancakes and a lot of oatmeal because it's very all the food we had in the habitat was either freeze dried or packaged. Everything had to survive a trip to Mars or the moon. And so we had a very limited choice in the food we can make, but we did get creative with the ingredients we had. So, like I said, pancakes, oatmeal, and we'd have those with freeze-dried fruit slices in the morning, like mango or papaya. Lunch was usually mac and cheese or some kind of pasta, either real pasta or this weird bean sprout pasta you can see on the right that was very, very tangly and very messy to eat because it just stuck everywhere. And then usually our protein was either beans or rehydrated chicken, which you could make taste good, but without it just tasted like I don't know, packing peanut foam. But and then for dinner was always lunch leftovers. And one of our favorite things that the crew invented how to make with the ingredients available were garlic knots. And we ate a lot of those because it was kind of the only real thing that reminded of us of home. And there was a lot of putting spices on everything to add flavor to the dehydrated food. Here's a board that we had to write all our allergies on, and so that was just something to keep in mind throughout the mission. And we loved bread, so we joked that we'd have bread every night for dinner, breakfast, and lunch. So that's why it says bread on bread for all our meals. But one cool thing that we did with the food was, and it was an experiment that I mentioned earlier, we had a lettuce grow experiment where we had this machine that grew lettuce and different types of edible leaf completely without any sunlight or outside the environment. So it was all in the habitat. And you can see on the left at day 2 was the lettuce. Like when we put it in, it was just sprouted. And midway through the mission, this was in December, mid-December, and so we figured we'd celebrate Christmas. So we turned it into our very own Christmas tree with stockings and hats. And then on the right was on the lettuce at the end of the mission, day 13, and you can see how much it grew. And so it was really cool to watch it grow and see the progress every day. And then at the end of the mission, we got to eat it all as like our first fresh thing we had eaten all in the 2 weeks. So that was incredible. So one of the best things we did all mission was getting out of the habitat and going on EVA. So prepping for the EVA was a 30-minute when we first did it was an hour process, but we got pretty good and were able to do it in 30 minutes. But you can see our suits there on the right. We each had our own sweat and dirt on it. And then on the left were the actual EVA equipment. We had a helmet and a backpack that could carry our research supplies, but also acted as a life support system. So we were actually getting that simulation of wearing a spacesuit. You couldn't walk outside unless you had this on. So you put it on and you had this fan in your ear that was feeding you constant fresh air so your visor wouldn't fog up. So even when you were outside, you were still inside, and you had no physical like skin contact with the outside world. And we had these really thick gloves we had to wear that were simulating the thick gloves that they wear in space because of just how rigid and these astronaut suits are when they're pressurized. So yeah, getting ready was a long process, but exciting one because you're anticipating going out into the world on the moon, and before you could go out, you had to go in the airlock, and it had to depressurize to the moon zero atmosphere, and that was a 2-minute process both ways. So if you were coming back in, you had to wait 2 minutes. And if you were going out, you had to wait 2 minutes. And it was the longest 2 minutes ever because on the way out, you're super excited and you're ready to get out and you want the 2 minutes to be over. And on the way in, you're super tired and you just want to lay down. And so the 2 minute takes forever that way too. But it was definitely worth it because EVAs were incredible. You're outside and you're getting to see this environment that there's nothing around you, not even a plant, just rocks and volcanic rocks. And the only real man-made thing you can see in the distance besides the habitat were the telescopes on top of Mauna Kea because they have observatories up there. But we did several EVAs throughout the mission. I believe I went on 6 or 7, and they ranged from just simple science EVAs around the habitat to actually going and exploring lava tubes. And the lava tube EVAs were definitely the most amazing thing about the mission. And we went to a total of 3 lava tubes, and I'll show you those now. The first lava tube we went to was called Karadros, and something you'll notice at high seas, all of the geological landmarks, whether they're lava tubes or hills or big rocks, they're all either named after Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. So Karadros is from Lord of the Rings. I believe it's a mountain in the universe. But our first lava tube was Karadros. It was a big hole in the ground basically that we had to climb our way into and walk through. And you just kept getting deeper and deeper to the point where there was no natural sunlight coming in to the lava tube at all. You're completely underground and it's completely silent, and it's a very different world. You really truly feel like you're on the moon. I mean, it's crazy. You can see me on the left standing by a skylight that was in the middle of the lava tube, and then on the right, that is a picture of me at the back of the lava tube with the only light being the flashlights on our helmets. So one of the things we like to do in every lava tube we went into was get in the back and just sit in the bottom at the very back without our flashlights on and just sit there in the silence and just like take in how isolated it is and how there's, no life back there except little microbes. The second lava tube we went to was called the Kessel Run. It was this very long lava tube that stretched down the volcano, and it would constantly dip down and back up on the surface. Our entry point in the lava field. It's just basically a hole that we had to crawl into. And that entry point you can see on the top left, that big split in the rock up there was where we entered, and we had to climb down into the lava tube over all those rocks and jagged area. And then turning around, you see the lava tube stretch back for miles, like on the bottom left. And it would just keep going and dipping up and down, and then you come up to a skylight and then back down and keep going. So that was a really cool lava tube as well. And this whole time, Leah and I on these lava tube EVAs, we're collecting our data from how our bodies reacting to these difficult EVA environments. So climbing and getting over rocks, and how fast our heart's going, and how much we're breathing. So that is the data we're collecting. But then like our crew member, Emily, who's a biologist, she was actually sampling the different microbe colonies that were living in these lava tubes, the extremophiles they're called, because they live in these extreme environments. Because she wanted to learn about what kind of bacteria live where in the lava tubes, and she actually works for a company that's trying to do research on how you don't cross-contaminate when you go to the moon or Mars from Earth to Mars or back with tools you send there. So she has a very cool job, and that was her research that she was doing on the mission. And our last lava tube we got to go to was the Sarlacc pit, and this was definitely the most intense of all of them. It was literally a hole in the ground that looks like a Sarlacc pit in the top left there. You have to jump down in it, and then there's this hole that's about the size, big enough for one person, and you go down in a corkscrew. Like it's like a little spiral tube that goes down until you reach a T-junction, and you're completely underground. There's no light anywhere. But there's these incredible lava formations, and it looked like the ceiling, it looked like melted chocolate dripping down, and on the floor there was the two other times you can walk. But I remember there was one room where we go in and you're sitting down and you look up at the ceiling, and the minerals and different crystals that have formed in the ceiling make the ceiling look like stars. So it was literally sparkling like the night sky, and that was amazing. center top there, that picture of me kneeling down, that's actually me testing a sampling device that our lab created for Artemis moon missions. So it was cool to get to take that and actually get to test it in an environment that was similar to what the astronauts would be experiencing on the moon. And the best thing by far about the whole trip, whole mission, were the night EVAs. It was incredible to get suited up, and you would turn off the lights in the airlock and all your lights off on your helmet and everything, and you'd wait those 2 minutes as the airlock depressurized, and then you'd open the door and you'd walk out and you'd just see so many stars. Like, it was incredible. Those pictures are definitely exposure shots, but the amount of stars you were seeing was very, very similar to what you see. The Milky Way was the best I've ever seen in my life. So both those pictures are me standing outside the habitat, doing some cool shots for high seas promo stuff. But it was so much fun walking around the habitat, looking at everything in the dark and just looking up at the stars at night. So that was something we always look forward to every night, is who would get to go on the night EVA. And here's another shot of a night EVA. This was amazing because the photographer James, who was on the mission, he went up on this hill that was cresting the habitat, and he told me to stand down by the habitat. So that's me. And right as he took the shot, a meteor went through the picture. And I was just looking at it by myself, and it was amazing. And I was like, oh man, I hope he got that in the photo. And of course he did. So that was incredible. Yeah, but the mission wasn't all fun and dandy. There were challenges, and it's to be expected when you're going on a long duration spaceflight mission. And that's also what high seas is about. It's how people react to those challenges when they're disconnected for so long. And some of the challenges we had were the weather. It posed multiple challenges to the crew because when the weather was bad and the clouds rolled in, we didn't have any power, and we were in low power mode, and you can't do anything except sit in a blanket and hope that the weather clears and you get more power so you can turn the heat on. But it did get very cold up there at 8,000 feet. And so we were just waiting, and we had several days of bad weather. But luckily, we had a great mission weather-wise. And then also the biggest challenge for me was how disconnected you are. I realized how glued I am to my phone and the news, and how I can just text my friend or call my mom. But there, all I had was email, and you can only email certain times of the day, and you're completely on your own. You have no clue what's going on the outside world. So it was very humbling, and it was definitely a challenge and not a challenge that I expected to struggle with so much. But I'm proud of myself for sticking through that challenge, and it was very rewarding coming out of the mission and knowing that I did that. And so it just gave me more respect for those astronauts that are going to live on the ISS for a year at a time, to how disconnected they are. And to finally conclude, going back to the whole imagination quote by Carl Sagan, the mission was fun, and a lot of the reasons why it was so successful is because of our crew's imagination. You can go through the mission and look at it very realistically, and it'll still be rewarding. But the imagination that was brought out in all these adults that are pretending they're on the moon is incredible, because you truly get to feel like you are when all of your crew are right there with you. And without imagination, we wouldn't be doing this research to actually eventually send people back to the moon and Mars. And without imagination, we would never go there in the first place. So imagination is a big part of it, and it helped me realize again how important imagination is when you're an engineer or a scientist, or you're trying to solve real world problems. Imagination is so important. So that was to answer. Yeah, thank you so much.
So Niko, I think you're still having some connection problems, but I don't know if you can hear me, but that sounds like an incredible experience. Oh, I think he's off. Maybe hopefully he'll come back on. And for those of you who have questions, we'll get them. Hey, Niko.
Hi.
That looks like an incredible opportunity. I'm jealous.
Jealous.
Especially with
totally
the whole
jealous.
lava tube thing. Looks fantastic. And to have that experience, now under your belt. I'm going to ask the first question. What was the first thing when you came back to the real world that really, made you reflect on, your experience? That the first kind of understanding about, the experience you just had.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because as the weather kept getting bad every once in a while on the mission, but the last week of the mission was really clear, not like basically a cloud in the sky, which we were really lucky. But the day that the mission ended, it was completely foggy outside. The cloud was surrounding the habitat, so we were packing up in the rain basically. And the first time we stepped out of the habitat, you step out and all of a sudden it's really cold and this rain is hitting your face and your skin and you're like like you haven't had the actual sun on your skin in 2 weeks, and so it's a very like grounding, like, oh wow, I'm back and this is over. And it really made me stop and think about how the astronauts that actually go to space for a year, how they must feel when I feel this way just after 2 weeks. So it was very reflective, coming out of the mission that way, and also very sad because you're happy to be back on Earth, but you're gonna miss your crew and miss the time that you had in space. So
Great. Other questions for Niko?
This is Ned Smith. About eating, was there a designated cook or every man for himself?
it was every man for himself, but we definitely got in a routine of uh, who was the best cook, and who specialized at what things. So um, Emily and I were always tackling the garlic knots because we were the ones that figured that out. We always had Gianna working on breakfast because she was good at making oatmeal and pancakes. But it was definitely at first a struggle to figure out who was going to make what and when. And but at weekend the mission, we got into our routine and it became pretty. The food improved a lot once we figured that out.
Niko, in the podcast, they talked about the wind and the storms that would come through. Did you experience any of that in the habitat? Did you hear the wind blowing through it?
We did. You can actually, at night we didn't really get a lot of storms, but the wind up there gets really fast. That's very powerful. And so at night you're laying in your bed and the whole dome shakes and moves. And at first, first couple nights, you're like, I hope this thing doesn't fly off and expose us to the elements. But then you get used to it. But the wind was definitely crazy. And actually, um, while we were on the mission, we were sitting down for breakfast one morning, and the whole habitat started shaking, and it was because there was an earthquake on the island. And Michaela, our commander, who's a geologist, she was talking about how it could be volcanic related, but only time will tell. And then literally 3 days later, when the mission was over, Kilauea erupted on the other side of the island. So we were there feeling that actual volcanic activity. So you're very close to the environment in the habitat even still.
What's a garlic knot?
Garlic knot was our version of garlic bread, I guess, that you'd get at like an Italian restaurant, or it was just baked bread that we put a ton of garlic powder on to give some flavor to.
So you were there for 2 weeks. What do you think? Can we do it for 5 or 6 years on Mars? You think humanity can stand it?
I think so. I mean, I think there are definitely people that are suited for that. I would want to come back, that's for sure, if I were to go to Mars. But um, we're getting better and better at how we pick crews and how we select them to get along. And only time will tell, I guess, on how successful we can make those missions to Mars.
That is great. Thank you very much, Niko.
Of course.
I would love to ask you all kinds of questions about lava tubes, but it may not in this setting.
I'm going to go ahead and end the live broadcast so the club can say hello to Niko, because I know lots of folks want to wave at him and say hello. So thank you for watching online. Give me 2 seconds as I